good? The sound sounds very loud. Is it good though? Can you guys hear me in the back? Yeah? You're welcome to sit up here, by the way, you guys. Hi, I am Hope McCutcheon, and welcome to the first CE2 of 2023. CE2 stands for Charlottesville Entrepreneurs in Espresso, and gosh, we're in year 8. How cool is that? This has been going on every month, except for every now and then, like December, since 2015. So raise your hand if this is your first time attending CE2. Wow, welcome. Glad to have you guys, definitely. Well, this is an event that has participation, which is kind of cool. It's a pretty unique event. But basically how it's set up is we have 2 speakers every month. We have an early stage company, which will talk about their company, and then they have an ask for the audience, and that's your chance to help them get to the next level in their business. And then we have a more seasoned, usually 20+ year entrepreneur that shares their crash and learn stories. So you have the opportunity to hear stories that you might not typically get to hear. And then there's a Q&A there. So this organization, or this event, is run by a number of organizations. And so we have CIC, the Community Investment Collaborative, which helped us set up the table and check in and all that. So we appreciate them big time. And then the SBDC, Virginia Small Business Development Center, also helped back there. And then CBIC, Charlottesville Business Innovation Council. And we are sponsored by the Batten Institute of UVA, Watermark Design, and of course the Code Building is so generous to let us use this space as well. So we're very appreciative. And this is a co-working space, by the way. I'm a member. I know there's some other members in here. And if you're interested in a tour after, we can talk about that. We can hook you up. And you can tour this building. So we can go ahead and get started. And we have announcements at the end too. So I'll talk about it at the end what that looks like. So we can jump right in with our first speaker. So I wanted to introduce John and Mandy Crombie, and their company is called The Back Porch. And what's really cool about them is we can welcome them to Charlottesville. They actually just moved here from Austin in August. And they had this concept they're going to share with you. They were exposed to in Austin. And while it wasn't something they necessarily were going to try to expand there when they came to Charlottesville, they recognized that we don't have this here. And so that's what they want to do. They're starting a business here, and they want your ideas on getting it off the ground. They are married with 2 kids, and they have a dog, which is relevant, believe it or not. I'll get to that. Not the kids, but the dog. Yeah, I mean, the kids are relevant always, but, and what's cool is that Mandy, so by profession, she's a speech pathologist. He is a sales engineer for Dell, and she saw the opportunity to make her career change and just be a full-time entrepreneur at some point as they get this running. But she went through the CIC program right when she got here, which is pretty cool. Maybe they did. I don't know. She did. Okay, she did. So they came here just to be closer to family that's along the East Coast. So help me welcome John and Mandy Crombie.
Hi all, we're John and Mandy. I'm a proud recent graduate of the CIC 16-week entrepreneur workshop. And there I learned how to take our idea and begin the process of turning it into something more for Charlottesville. We're here and excited to talk about the back porch and our vision for the back porch. There we go. That's it. Our vision is that the back porch will provide an off-leash dog park where dogs and their humans enjoy a safe and a welcoming space that promotes health while offering quality opportunities to strengthen that social connectedness that we all need.
Morning. Thanks for coming today. Really appreciate it. So the back porch. like Mandy said, this is a membership dog park. What we have here, the vision for the back porch is to have that safe, secure, and healthy space for dogs to socialize with each other, get the daily exercise that, you know, we all want for our four-legged friends. Obviously, like I said before, we're providing a safe and healthy place for them, right? So the dogs are screened ahead of time. There are requirements around vaccinations, age, and temperament screenings as well. They're also going to be monitored by trained park rangers. That's what we call the folks that make sure dogs are behaving in a way that is safe when you bring your children, when you're enjoying food and drink. And then, okay. And then, you know, as part of the experience, there's always going to be activities that we're going to have, whether it's based around, you know, holiday themed activities. We're going to have services like dog wash stations, potential partnerships with other organizations like groomers or local pets. And so that's our vision for our four-legged friends. Now, for the folks in attendance here, our two-legged friends, all of you, you know, the idea is to build community, right? And so this is a place for you to bring your dogs, but also to meet coworkers, maybe work remote, have happy hours, maybe bring businesses come together and, you know, do something like this with your dog and with others, right? And, you know, we're going to provide, we're going to have food, we're going to have craft beverages, and, you know, the end result is going to be a happy dog. Right here, you see, we just include some pictures of what the space might look like. We also have a couple more right here. First is the ask while we're here today. You know, we have a great idea, we have a great concept. Right now, we're in the phase of looking for operating space, right? And so, you know, obviously looking for something close in the county, but close in, a 1 acre outdoor space, zone commercial, industrial, or planned mixed commercial development. The reason is obvious, you know, we can't just put this in a place where there might be noise concerns, you know, next to actual private residences. So it's real important that we're in one of those commercial industrial areas in town. Obviously, we'll need some parking and utilities. Not much in the way of infrastructure. You know, we do have some ideas about a small, you know, potential like a container, obviously, you know, bathrooms where we're going to serve the food, but it doesn't really require a lot of infrastructure to go in. And then, you know, right now, you know, we're open to purchase or lease for this space.
Like John said, don't need a whole lot of infrastructure, just a general picture of what that might look like, an acre of outdoor space, just with utilities to get basic container put on site for serving. And then we put up a fence and get some picnic tables, and that's about it.
And like we've described before, you know, from a funding perspective, the revenue streams are pretty simple, right? So, you know, how we bring in revenue is through memberships, monthly, yearly memberships. There's also, you know, day passes as well, you know, that we will offer, right, to bring the dog in. And then there'll also be food and beverage component, right? So the revenue streams are pretty simple. It's a nice business, easy business to operate. A secondary ask would be, you know, a potential collaboration with existing businesses that may already have a 1 acre plot of land. You know, something like, you know, there's a coffee shop or a cafe that, you know, is open for breakfast and lunch, but has space that might accommodate a dog park, and, you know, we would be open, you know, late from is potentially 11 to 8, right, to do food, craft beverages, place to bring the dog in the afternoon or evening. And then, also, the idea here would be to continue to form community partnerships and, bring value to those established businesses, where a dog park, would be mutually beneficial and a good partnership.
So thanks for your time this morning. We would appreciate any feedback, or questions. Yeah. I'm gonna give you the mic. I'm recording this, just so.
At the X Park, they had a game, people who came to fundraise for different things. And they brought their sort of, cage to containment area on a truck. So what I'm trying to suggest is that there are, like, the Goat Busters guy, they go around to different places for 3 months at a time. They bring their own containment, fencing or whatever, and that would be like cost-wise, and then you can invite other vendors as well, like the pie guy or somebody, and now there's a bar that goes with a horse trail to different places. So you can invite everybody and, pizza maker, whatever.
So this would be more of a mobile pop-up and
So you wouldn't have to pay for, anything at that point, you would just show up, you'd be invited, so to speak. So you'd start up like that.
Okay, so getting that invite for that available space. Yeah.
Do you have a sense of the size of the market, how many people are here that have dogs in town?
As part of our CIC workshop, we do a fair bit of customer discovery. So I spent a lot of time at the 3 dog parks here in town, and a lot of frustrated people because they're too crowded. You go to Darmtown at 5 o'clock and there's too many dogs. There's, things that result from being too crowded, people letting their kids in, just too much going on there to have a successful community building experience. So everything that I saw at all 3 parks indicated that there's a real need. And right now, everyone is taking their dogs out to breweries or out to wineries, but the dogs don't get that off-leash experience. So an opportunity for the dogs to get what they need, which is the exercise, while the humans get what they need, which is community.
We've also seen, as we've done a lot of research,
Any new development in Charlottesville, seems to be mixed use, very dense. And so it seems like a lot of the growth in the city is going to be, more on the townhome, more on the condo, more on the apartment, limited space, very few yards. And obviously what we've seen through COVID is there's no pet adoption business is booming. Everyone is continuing to adopt pets away and adopt dogs, and we don't see that slowing down either. And so that's what we saw in Austin. Austin, we were there for 16 years. The growth was incredible. We very much fell in love with a place like this right around off the corner from our house, and it's just a lot of tiny yards, a lot of dense mixed use development, and people need a place, right?
And really, the more dense we get, the more we need that space where we can turn our neighbors into friends.
I'm John Paul. I just bought 10 fruit trees in my yard. I was reading the directions about it, and it says, really needs to be fertilized in the first 2 years. I was wondering if you might think of a spin-off business, if the dogs, have excrement. That maybe we could,
Use the dogs to fertilize, put them to work.
have somebody
Okay.
that needs fertilizer,
Okay,
fertilizer.
sure, use it every piece of our products.
that's a great idea, because it's gotta go somewhere, we have to put it somewhere.
Yeah,
Land in Charlottesville is incredibly hard to come by, and the city really is looking for open spaces.
Right.
But Forest Springs Beachville actually does have multiple acres in the city. Pretty sure it is zoned the way that you're talking about, so that would be a possibility.
Okay.
And while they're, from what I've heard, incredibly difficult to deal with, it's not impossible. And UVA actually has a third of men in the city.
Yep.
Right, yes, we can kind of that.
And so if you can make any sorts of inroads with them.
Yep.
It would be basically trivial for them to kick off an acre somewhere, for your use.
Okay, that's great to know. We're looking for.
Yes, thank you.
Yes. That's
So back there.
So, somebody who doesn't own dog, doesn't understand the attachment to dogs is speaking here. But I am hearing from friends and colleagues all the time that they take their dogs to a location that they get together and talk to neighbors. So your idea seemed to really, it's ready to blossom. And I also understand that many of the development, like Walk Hill, Mill, or whatever it's called, this one, or Water, already have a place dedicated for dog owners to go and bring their dogs. So maybe you guys can partner and just offer the service on top of the available space, even smaller subset. Because city,
So finding
I feel interested.
those dog parks and then providing the safety oversight.
Yep.
As like part of this thing.
It's a great idea. And,
You're free to come to our dog park without a dog. Your admittance is free.
The membership is for the dogs,
yeah,
so.
the dogs have to pay to get in.
I'll do like events that are always welcome.
Okay, I'm just curious, what kind of licensing constraints would you have if you're serving alcohol?
That's a big
Because
component.
that would be, you would need that for your site.
Exactly, yeah, so, that's where the mobile component is tricky, if we're looking to serve craft beverages, which we are, that's a big piece of our revenue stream. So, that process is long and can get started once we know where we'll be.
Anybody else have any thoughts for them? Okay, do you have your contact information? So their contact information is right there. As you continue to brainstorm and come across connections and ideas, please do reach out to them and how can they stay abreast of, the development? I know you don't have a website yet, but.
That's a great question. As soon as we get a little further along, we'll intend to get active on social media so we can build the excitement. But for right now, just reaching out to us directly, and then once we do find that location, we'll build a following.
Awesome, cool, give them a hand, thank you so much. Right, so, now for our next speaker, and there, I know we ran low on coffee, but there might be more right now, just a heads up. Yep, there's more coffee, which I think is important, it's in our title and everything. All right, so I'm very excited now to introduce our Crash and Learn speaker. Jim Zappoletti actually came, I think, in November, at our November C2, and he's been on my mind to ask to speak for a while, so I tapped his shoulder, and it was a really good time. So just a little bit about him. He actually grew up on the eastern seaboard of New York, Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, etc., and went to Amherst College in Massachusetts, where he studied econ and art history and actually sung there. He was in an a cappella group, and he's gonna love what I said. He's award-winning, but anyway, so he graduated magna cum laude and then went on. He worked for GE right out of school, and actually within 2 years he left that and started his first company. So he started a company called Flea Markets. And so he was a founder and kind of served a couple of different roles there for about 8 years. And then eventually that company got sold to what is now SAP. Right? And the other company I mistyped. So anyways, Ariba Zero. But anyways, after that, he got an HR certificate, an executive leadership program rather, is what he went through, and then went to Darden, and so that's actually what brought him to Charlottesville, and he stayed because of the startup scene here. Began OpenQ, so that is software for the pharmaceutical industry. He actually, at that day, as clients, had about 11 of the top 15 pharmaceutical companies utilizing their software. That company was bootstrapped, and within 2 years was profitable. Grew nicely. He'll get into that story. That's part of this Crash and Learn. But eventually he started Social Safeguard, which is social media compliance solution, also adopted by a lot of top companies like USAA, CVS, Johnson & Johnson. And that company eventually became Safeguard Cyber. He is now on the board of that company. He was CEO, but stepped down about a year ago. So he's had a year to kind of stretch his legs and do some other things to begin preparing for his next startup. So he is married with 4 kids that are 18 to 24, and just having a huge impact as an entrepreneur, been an entrepreneur for over 25 years, and I know he's got a lot of really great stories. So please help me welcome Jim Zebley.
So the first thing I want to say is I will not be singing my Crash and Learn story, just in case any of you were worried about it. And I do want to shout out the question because it was, I don't know how many of you are dog people, but that was definitely kind of on my mind. So that's an important topic to make sure we cover. So I have the opportunity today to talk about Crash and Learn. And I've been an entrepreneur, actually I was doing the math, and so I'm in my 30th year, more or less, of doing entrepreneurship in one way, shape, or form. It's in different forms, and honestly, to kind of begin my journey to talk about that Crash and Learn, I would start by saying I was not an entrepreneur as a thought that was in my head as I was going through undergraduate or growing up or anything like that. I really ended up kind of backing into the opportunity. And it really started when I was in my first job, and it was one of those jobs that had like 6-month rotations, and the second rotation in, so I'd been an employee of a big company for about 6 months, and I got involved in a startup within that organization. And I got to the end of the 6-month period and got a really good review, but the person pulled me aside and essentially said, as a skilled person, because I was in the finance area, you're pretty average of a person, and the only reason that we gave you a good rating, if you will, was because of the work that you did associated with being involved in a startup within the organization. And so that was kind of the moment for me to recognize who I was, what my capabilities were, and that became an opportunity to get involved in another startup within the organization, and then ultimately to get an opportunity to work with somebody who left that big company at the time, which is GE, and start a company called Free Markets. And this was 1995 when we started, and it was an incredible startup opportunity to be involved in, because I was a junior member of the team in a high growth moment when we went from, there were 4 of us at the founding, to 1,400 at the height of the organization in size. We went public. We did all of those things that were kind of cool things to do in the 1990s. And the Crash and Learn story kind of begins with recognizing that as I was involved in that startup, and again, I wasn't the CEO, I was kind of a member of the senior team, shall we say. One of the things that I always admired or coveted or envied, as you will, was the fact that once we became a big public company in the B2B space, we would watch the news and we would watch what our competitors were doing. One of our competitors was actually the one who ultimately bought us. And I would always admire about the fact that they would be one move ahead of our organization. They would always have the next step in mind in terms of the development of where they were going to take their particular product line. And so I resolved to myself that I said, whenever I'm going to start my next business, I'm going to make sure that I can see where I need to take the company and be that company who is one step ahead of the competition in terms of all the moves that I would make down the chessboard, so to speak. So I finished my run at this company and left and came here to Charlottesville to get a business school degree. And I met my co-founder very soon after I started business school. And ultimately, we got to work almost immediately on my crash and burn story, which is this company called OpenQ. And I will spare you lots of the details about what OpenQ does, but let me just give you kind of a quick Reader's Digest because it helps for context. So OpenQ is a pharmaceutical software company. So we sold software to the pharmaceutical industry. And if you wanted to appreciate kind of the general flavor of the software that we provided, it was a very special niche within customer relationship management, or SFA, Salesforce automation software. So how many of you are familiar with the company Salesforce.com? Okay, so a lot of people here. So it's kind of a specialized version of that. So we started this company in business school, and we had a great kind of initial 4 years associated with building the company. We had an opportunity to get a product, to get some early initial customer feedback that was really important. We had an opportunity to build what I would call a web of customers, starting with little customers who were making little bets on us, to ultimately bigger customers that were making big bets on us. The biggest customers that we had an opportunity to sell to and then close deals with at the time were Novartis, and then another big customer was Amgen. So the big West Coast genetic, multi-line pharmaceutical company. So we had this great moment, and to start the story, I want to go a couple of years into that experience. And we're a couple of years out of business school. We've got this business operating. We've survived the 2008 financial collapse, and many of you lived through it in different forms, so you know it was hard to run a company during that period. We had just signed another big pharmaceutical company. At this time, this is Bristol Myers Squibb. And our particular software, at that point, we received an analyst report that rated us as kind of a top company. And so things were really moving forward and moving very well for us. And we got a phone call. And the phone call is from an individual whose name is Matt Wallach. And Matt calls us, and Matt's name is familiar to us because in the early days of starting OpenQ, Matt was one of the people that we contacted to try to get some advice about the pharmaceutical industry. And so Matt called us, and we thought, well, we're the established company, so we can talk about, our space, and he's the one who's, as it was discovered, was the one who was starting a new company. And actually, Matt's idea wasn't to start a company in a niche like we were in. He was actually going to go after the gigantic CRM opportunity in all of the pharmaceutical industry. So we met with Matt, and we had a great discussion. And Matt told us very thoughtfully that they were going to take over this giant space, and that we also needed to have be prepared because at one point they would probably come after us. And I had a lot of respect for Matt because Matt was telling us this up front. But at the same time, I also thought, well, you probably are in my brain at the time, I'm this big company. I am this established top player in the space, and this other company is telling me that they're going to take me out. And by the way, they're not going to take me out immediately. What they're going to do is they're going to take out this big market opportunity, and then once they did that, they were going to take me out. And I said, there's no way to do it. And I had expectations and predictions about the nature of the market, about why that wasn't possible. One of the predictions that we had is that between that big market opportunity and the small niche that we were in, there was a regulatory line that had been established by the FDA. And we were very confident that that regulatory line wouldn't be breached. We were also really confident that our CRM solution had data inside it when you bought it, and that would make a big difference to a potential customer. And so we felt very strongly that we had this incredible differentiation that would keep a company like Matt's new company from ultimately competing with us. So, and then we had one other means by which we were very confident about that. And that was a company called Ce-2. And so within that big space of Salesforce automation, there was a company called Ce-2 that was $1 billion in sales. And they were a dominant player in the SFA space for the pharmaceutical industry. And there was no way that that other company could take on that big player and then ultimately come get us. So that's a setup of the opportunity or challenge that we were facing. So fast forward into about 2010. So this is about 2 years later, and Viva has become a company that's out there starting to grow pretty rapidly. And we're watching Viva, and we're continuing to not be concerned about Viva, but we're making moves that we think are going to defend ourselves effectively against them. So one of the things that we do at the time is we go to Ce-2, this big company, and we hire away one of their head of sales, because we think if we've got the head of sales from this big company, there's no way that this smaller upstart company can come after us in our niche opportunity. So we hire that individual, and that individual comes to us and tells us his particular view of the space, which is, of course, there's no way that this company that Matt has started is ultimately going to be able to come back after us. He can see the future, as he says, and the future is that Ce-2 is going to dominate that space. And so we're totally fine staying in our niche opportunity where we can be very successful and we can grow. And we're at $5 million in revenue at that point. We have a year where we're pretty confident we're going to hit $10 million in revenue in terms of the overall. And we do a venture round of financing, so we start to raise real money at that point after bootstrapping for a period of time. And then we start getting our first alarm bells. And our first alarm bell is we signed Pfizer early on in the development of the business, but we didn't sell Pfizer on our niche, our primary product, our niche product. And we thought it'll be no problem because we'll just move laterally within Pfizer and we'll figure out a way for ultimately to sell Pfizer on that same exact product that is the industry's top product. It's just a matter of time. And we found out, despite our efforts again and again and again, that we could not move laterally in that business. We couldn't take that fundamental business. And one of the things that we knew was that that was one of Matt's first major customers. And so there was a difficulty that we could see an alarm bell from the fact that we couldn't dislodge that company. So that was the first alarm bell that happened. The second, and then we moved forward and we've done our financing round. And at this point, we're almost $10 million in sales. Matt's company has grown a ton, but they're about 3 times our size. They're about 30 million in sales from their initial startup, but they're in a space that's about 10 times larger. So we're expecting them to be significantly bigger than us. The big competitor, Ce-2, is still out there. They're continuing to make about $1 billion in terms of their overall revenue. And then we start to see real cracks in the wall. And the first crack that we see is that flagship customer that we had signed, Amgen, moves over to Matt's new company. And so our number one customer disappears. Now, that was starting to happen as we're raising money, but we were still able to tell a story about growing and being a successful company and the like. But we were starting to see the difficulty of selling our product into any company that was already starting to do business with Matt's company as it was developing. So then you head forward 2 more years. So we're now in 2013. And at this point, the company, Matt's company, goes public. And at that point, they are a little more than 60 million in revenue overall. But they are still dwarfed by Ce-2, who continues to be a billion dollar plus organization. But we start seeing more challenges in terms of our inability to try to hold on to customers or secure customers in the space. But we are so confident in the business and what we're doing, and we are so sure that Ce-2 is going to crush Matt's company, that we actually have discussions about the fact that since they've gone public now and their stock has skyrocketed, there's no way they can sustain that. So we actually talk about shorting the stock because we think that there's no way that their stock can go any higher than it does from their IPO. It's already wildly overpriced. So what happens next? Now, most of you are in the future, so you know what happens next, but let me give you a little bit of the narrative. So we hit the high water mark when we end up trying to sell to another big pharmaceutical company that people have heard about called Abbott. And to give you a sense of how painful it was, we had successfully conveyed how different we were. The customer had already been using our software some. We had been told that we got the award. We were about to start the contracting discussions. And then we got the phone call that we had lost to Matt's company. So at that point, we had literally gotten to the 1 yard line, to draw the football analogy, and we lost the business. And so at that point, we realized we were starting to see the decline of where we could operate with that niche opportunity. And so the next thing that happened was we lost BMS, which was our second major customer. And then within a short span of a couple of years, we saw customer after customer after customer ultimately move away from us, or saw ourselves have the difficulty of ultimately selling to any new customers with that core product. We were only surviving because we had some other ancillary products that were out there, as well as a little data subscription that we could keep the lights on. And ultimately, we hit the high water mark, and that business we sold for about $2 million as an asset sale, because we had been completely crushed by that other company. And I'll talk about the lessons in a second, but just to give you kind of a sense of the degree of being crushed. So we sold the company for $2 million. That major company that's called Ce-2, they're still alive, but their market cap is down from being a $1 billion type of market cap company. They are now a fraction of the size of themselves, and their market cap is somewhere around $200 million at this point. And that company, Matt's company, that company that went public in 2013, that's a company called Viva, for those of you who might be familiar with it. And Viva went public in 2013. Their revenue at this point is $1.9 billion. Their profit is $425 billion, and their market cap is $26 billion. So we got completely crushed by Matt, but ultimately we didn't really get crushed by Matt. We got crushed because there were important lessons that we needed to learn as an organization that we have unfortunately learned the hard way. And there are two lessons that I wanted to kind of close with that are related to, I've had an opportunity in the last year since stepping down to be involved with a professor at Darden who studies entrepreneurship and has created a theory called effectuation, which I'm happy to talk about if there are questions. But there were two takeaways as we looked at that experience that really resonate out of this world of effectuation. The first one is, when you are facing a decision that is in front of you, you need to be discerning about whether it is a decision that's based on risk or uncertainty. And there's a lot of academia behind it, but more or less the way to think about it is this. If you believe that you know every possible outcome that's possible ahead for the decision that you're making, that's really a function of risk. You're making a decision between X and Y. There's 40% of X, there's 60% of Y. I'm going to make a decision based on those potential expected outcomes associated with it. That's a risk decision. We make risk decisions every day where we believe that we know the totality of the information that's relevant, and we make decisions to go left or right, if you will, or between A, B, and C. But what if you don't know every possible outcome that's associated with that particular circumstance? Or to add to it, what if you don't know any of the particular outcomes with any particular confidence whatsoever? Then you are in an environment of uncertainty. And that was the real takeaway for us, was again and again, we felt the confidence that we knew where the market was, we knew where the market was going, and so we felt like we were making decisions that were really calculated risks back and forth, again and again and again, when really what we were dealing with was a market that was driven by uncertainty. And anyone who's in this room who's been operating businesses during COVID understands exactly what that is. None of us predicted COVID, and none of us could have predicted exactly what happened associated with COVID and how it affected our relevant businesses. And that's the second takeaway that I came from. So the first one is understand the distinction between risk and uncertainty in the decision before you. How much information do you really have? The second one is this. When you are in an environment where you have to operate in the state of uncertainty, instead of thinking about prediction and vision for what you think is going to be, the lesson is you have to focus on what you can control. Because what is in your control are things that you can know a lot more about the potential outcomes associated with it than the items where you have a great deal of uncertainty. So think back to the development of our business. We didn't think that they would ever breach the regulatory wall that was out there. The FDA said the wall existed, and yet the wall was breached. One of the other lessons that we learned is, while we thought being the best would ensure that we would always be a contender in the space, good enough was something that we learned from it. And again, we were trying to predict where the market was going. And instead, what we found is that if we had maintained more emphasis on controlling that which was in our direct abilities, things like working with our customers and where were our customers evolving, making sure that our data product, which was tied to our software, was as tightly coupled as possible. There were things that were within our control that we would ultimately have the opportunity to make much better decisions about. So if any of you are entrepreneurs, my strongest advice to you is, from my crash and learn experience, is make sure that you spend as little time as possible being a predictor, and make sure that you spend as much time as possible focusing on what you or the network of people that you build as you develop your business is in your locus of control. Take actions that you can control. And I can say this with the conviction that I've learned the hard way, but I can also tell you that that's what the data in management science actually supports. If you look up the theory of effectuation, what it'll show you is that time and again, expert entrepreneurs who have been successful again and again are the entrepreneurs who make decisions, and those decisions emphasize control versus predicting. They actually hate market research. What they believe is doing what they can control. So that's my lesson for today. With that, I'm happy to take a question or two.
Awesome, thank you so much. Give him a hand. use the link, and we're recording this, so it'll be, available to watch. If you have friends that miss it, you can tell them it'll be on the YouTube channel, but, I'm gonna pass the mic.
That question on control prediction. Yep. Seems to be a fundamental problem for entrepreneurs because you start as an entrepreneur predicting something that the market needs, customer wants, and therefore you go somewhere where others have not gone. And so what you're saying is, okay, start with that, but once that works, then forget about all of that and just focus on control.
Yeah, in fairness, it's nuanced, I think, and your point is valid. So, and let me give credit where credit is due. So, Professor Sarasvathy is the name of the professor at Darden, has done a lot of research, and what she's basically done is said there is a mythology about entrepreneurs that entrepreneurs can see the future exactly the way it's going to be. They're visionaries. I think Steve Jobs is a classic example of that. And that what they do is marshal the right resources to ultimately build a business that's exactly in line with what they envision in the future. But the reality from the research is that that progression, which is from prediction into control, is actually not what the best entrepreneurs do. And what the lesson really is that prediction and control really are like two axes on a chart. And so at any given moment, to your point, at any given moment, as you start a business, or even as you operate a business, you may be adopting strategies that are high on control and very low on prediction, or you may be able to adopt strategies that are higher on prediction, but necessarily lower on control. And so the way to think about that is to contrast an entrepreneur with a banker. A banker is very causal. They're high on prediction and low on control, whereas an entrepreneur tends to be the exact opposite. But the reality is when you operate your business, depending on the circumstances of what's the risk in front of you, you may have a high prediction, low control decision. You have to know how to discern. Next question. Oh, Ringer and Pack is going to ask me a question. No, all right, please.
So I come from a social science background, and I'm trying to make sense of everything that you're saying, which is very fascinating. And I'm wondering if you can say a little bit more about what the value, so it sounds like at certain stages, the logic of prediction is useful. And then, for me in social science research, theories of change, you almost never can predict because of theories of change. And so I'm wondering, my question is, if you can say more about why it's useful.
Absolutely. So the first thing from an academic perspective, if you wanted to dig into the academics behind it, if there's a lot of articles about effectuation and Professor Sarasvathy, but if you want to look at the underpinning, it's back to exactly what you were just describing, which is the fact that there's a concept called Knightian uncertainty. So before there was Phil Knight from Nike, there was a Nobel laureate named Frank Knight. And what Frank Knight did is he was the person who originally defined the distinctions between risk, uncertainty, and then what you call true uncertainty, which ultimately became called Knightian uncertainty. And so if you were to think about what expert entrepreneurs do as their logic of action, they're in that third space where everything is uncertain. And in the face of uncertainty, the only thing that you can do is establish control, is to take control actions associated with it. So if you look at the literature behind effectuation and Knightian uncertainty, that's kind of where it comes from. And what Professor Sarasvathy did beyond that was distill beyond what I've just described. It's into five principles, if you will, that all expert entrepreneurs take, and that's beyond the scope of this. But the number one is what's called the bird in hand, which is know what your needs are, know who you are and who you know, because you have to build a network behind it. And then there are other principles that stem from it, but that's kind of where some of the literature comes from. I don't think I did a great job. I think I've demonstrated I'm not an academic. Jason?
Hey, Jim, thanks for the story. So I'm still trying to wrap my head around this, and is it that Matt, who seemed very fascinating, did he just basically, was he more effectual? Did he out-effectuate you, or did he have a different bird in hand, or a different calculation around affordable loss, or what? Like, why, how could he have this hubris to come and say, I'm gonna take this market, and then I'm gonna come after you? And is it just that, like, give us a little of the background, like, and then maybe if you've got a couple minutes, just now that you've gone through that experience, you've obviously got the bird in the hand of a lot of more knowledge. Like, how would you describe yourself, like, that, who you are, what you know, and who you know?
Did he say that on? Did he like say, I'm almost gonna go after that $1 billion? I'm not gonna take that out.
Yes.
This bit now.
Yep.
Take that.
So there's a lot of elements to that question, Jason. So I'll try to answer that relatively briefly. So Matt Wallach started the company with another individual, if you start digging into Viva, named Peter Gassner. And so if you were to look at what were the lessons with that lens from watching Viva and watching how they operated, there were a couple of things. The first one is one that you kind of referenced, which is they both had what I would politely call a superior bird in hand to us. They had better means by which they understood the industry going in than we did. But I would tell you, because we actually talked to them a few times about being acquired by them. So we had lots and lots of discussions with them. And the big takeaway from them is that they did two things that are kind of central to effectuation. The first one is they're incredibly close to their customers. They established that their customers, not just as customers, but as part of their overall network. And within the pharmaceutical industry, there is a ton of referencing back and forth. And so we thought, frankly, that we were deep with our customers, but in reality, we weren't nearly as deep with our customers as they were. So they invested, and you can see it kind of in their arc of as they developed as a company. For a ton of time, they had one customer, two customers, not very many customers at all. And then it went crazy. And that dynamic of the fact that, in the case of Pfizer, they were really focused on serving the heck out of Pfizer. And we thought we had already left that phase. So there was definitely a superiority of bird in hand. There was a superiority of how they work with their customers. And then the final one is that we missed the opportunity to build the network, the crazy quilt, if you will, is the principle from effectuation, with all the other potential players in the space that would have made us more sticky. So for example, one of the things that they did early on is they built a relationship with the data provider. And so instead of creating their own data like we did, they actually partnered and got a better data product into the market that ultimately beat us up in terms of that. Back to your final question about who am I, what's my bird in hand associated with it. So this is a great question I get asked this at home as well. Honestly, right now, I would tell you I'm a big student of entrepreneurship, honestly. I've had an opportunity while I've been kind of on the beach, focusing in on effectuation, all the theories behind it, all the competing theories and the like, which has been super helpful. So understanding how entrepreneurs think has definitely been a benefit. And then I've continued to try to stay close, but to a lesser extent, with the industry that I came from most recently, which is cybersecurity.
Quick question. I'm really fascinated in the academic parts, fascinating as well. I was wondering if, got a few questions, but I'll just do one. Have you studied Stoic philosophy, and are you a Stoic?
I've only read a little bit about it, but since you brought up philosophical underpinnings, if you look at kind of the roots of effectuation, the creator of Effectuation, Professor Saraswati, is a big fan of Henry James, who is, or not Henry James, his brother, and I'm blanking on his first name, his last name is James, is a philosopher. And his particular, he was a rough peer of Dewey in the pragmatism space. So you could think a little bit about effectuation as a form of pragmatism.
If we could go to the entrepreneurial decision-making aspect, again, you've kind of been talking about.
Yep.
I appreciate you differentiating between risk and uncertainty. However, I think at times as entrepreneurs, we often cannot make those distinctions. And we feel like we are always operating in a world of uncertainty rather than risk. So one, how can entrepreneurs or how should individuals in the decision-making process make that differentiation? Because the decisions that come from that are drastically different, and how we make decisions and stages of uncertainty versus risk is drastically different. And then number two, within that, you had mentioned this comment that you're very confident that you knew your market and that you're making the right decisions and predicting the future. So as entrepreneurs, how can we minimize that notion of overconfidence and allow us to say, hey, we're dumb, and then we can make those better decisions?
Lots of stuff in that. And so let me try to answer that really quickly. So the very quick answer to the first part of your question is, in the early stages of starting up a business, what is proven by the data to be the best way is to radically shift in the direction of a control strategy versus a prediction strategy. So in the face of what you recognize as uncertainty, your best strategy is to focus on what you can control. Now, let me offer kind of a way that feels a little bit more kind of, it's called charitable, which is the elements of effectuation start with you understanding what your capabilities are and what you can control. But the second part of effectuation is, as quickly as possible, getting your thinking, your means into the hands of other people who then you expose to what you're trying to do, to what your burden hand is, who ultimately want to opt into your business. And what that allows you to do is those people who opt in open the door in terms of more things that you can control, and is a means of lowering, if you will, the level of uncertainty that you're facing. But the ultimate lesson from all of that is you are definitely in the early stages of the business. You are in a moment where you should almost presume uncertainty. Now, let me talk about that second piece, because the second piece is something that I've actually lived a lot, which is the challenge, which is in the environment where the best thing to do is to be a person who focuses on control. Whenever you raise money, you talk to two major constituencies. The first constituencies are banks, and the second constituency, if you're of this particular type of company, would be venture capital. And anybody want to guess between prediction and control, which part of the world the banks and the venture capitalists operate in? They all operate on the prediction side. So they want to hear from you, what is your prediction for the future? And so I've raised a lot of venture capital, and I've had to again and again talk about what I think the future is going to be. And the reality of the circumstances is that you have to learn how you can adopt and operate within both frameworks. But if you were to reduce what I'm thinking about day to day, I'm going to focus on what I can control much more often as a result. But I'm going to have to pragmatically understand that the world speaks prediction to me, and I have to speak it back. Now, the world should change, because the data is actually pretty good that venture investors, angel investors who focus on effectuation, so they focus on control versus prediction, are actually more successful. But the reality is a lot of the money out there is what you call causal emphasizing prediction, and you gotta play that game. Any other questions?
Yeah, so I'm done. Great talk. I want to come back and touch a little bit on the role that that regulatory barrier played. It was a pretty solid wall that you guys thought you weren't going to have a problem with. I know a lot of entrepreneurs going into space see regulatory barriers, especially when working towards pharma or med tech, as being, like you said, an impenetrable barrier.
Yeah.
And so I think my question is, in dealing with when Matt was setting up Diva, did he have, in retrospect, maybe talking with him, did he have a strategy to go and create that proliferation? And the secondary part as I'm thinking through this is, was he able to accomplish that by his deep partnerships with pharma to help influence where that was going? How would you do that differently if you saw it again today?
Yeah, so there's two elements I would kind of bring up associated with this. The first is we've talked about kind of these principles of effectuation, bird in hand, what is my capability. I just brought up the crazy quote, which is this idea of building a partnership. The fourth principle is actually called, unironically, the lemonade principle. And the idea with that is, if you are an entrepreneur and you are faced with an adversity, you must look at it and figure out how to utilize it as an opportunity. And regulatory lines are the best of all opportunities, because there is a presumption that dummies like me are going to assume the solid red line when it actually isn't a red line. And I would tell you, as I observed after the fact with Viva, one of the best partners that Viva had in breaking that red line was their own customers, because their customers went to them and said, we have this software that we use for this gigantic group, and we just want to use the same software for this smaller group. Can't we just do that? We'll even do 2 instances of the software. And the customer is all on board with that. And we did not take that as a given. So we should have used it as an opportunity, and we didn't, to the extent that we could.
All right, I wish we could stay and ask more questions, but I do know that Jim can stick around till 10, right? And so if you have more questions, he's here, and then can people email you or anything?
Yeah.
Not, sorry.
If you want to learn more about effectuation, it's www.effectuation.org. And my email is pretty simple. It's jim@effectuation.org. It's the easiest way to reach me.
Cool, thank you so much. Give him a hand. Absolutely. Okay, so now we move into announcements, and then we have the room till 10, so there might be 10 minutes or so to kind of gather in the back. But so how announcements work, we're gonna hear from the 3 organizations real quick that help run this, about any upcoming events or programs that they have, and then you have the opportunity to share either one, if there's an event that you want the group to know about, or 2, if your company is hiring. Those are 2 announcements that you guys have the opportunity to share. So let's start with I don't know, who's first? SBDC. So SBDC.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Shira Goldine. I am the events coordinator with the Central Virginia Small Business Development Center. We have the longest name, it's okay. There's a lot of new people here, so in case you haven't heard of the SBDCs, we are part of a national and state network. It's an SBA program. We are not the SBA, but we are an SBA program. We offer free and confidential one-on-one business advising, as well as educational training programs, and we're part of things like this. So we do a little bit of everything. We've got a team of expert business advisors on any number of topics, and then if we don't have the right person in our office, we have access to our state network, which has a whole wealth of experience throughout it, as well as access to all sorts of research tools and other fun goodies. So we help small businesses at any stage, from startup all the way through selling or closing a business. We can help with growth, we can help with finding financing and access to capital, marketing, record keeping, you name it, we can help with it. And if we're not the right organization, we're connected to a lot of other groups, we can help with sorts of other things. And then I run all of our events and programs. We do about 80 a year, keeps me nice and busy. They're all on our online calendar. Love to see people there. A couple of highlights that are coming up soon. We have our Founders Series starting on February 7th, Tuesday mornings, 9 to 11 a.m. So that is 5 weeks. It is a 5-session series that I like to think of as a little bit of a crash course business program. We cover customer discovery, marketing, business plans, pricing and product launch, all the way through financing and record keeping. There's some things in the middle I forgot, but it is a 5-week program. If you're interested, let me know. We have a lot more information about that online. And then other things coming up, we have a government contracting class later today, if anyone's interested, I think it's at noon. I hope it's at noon. But it's all online. Almost all of our programs are free. Some of them do have a small administrative fee. But if you have any questions, you can just let me know. But we are available for small businesses in city of Charlottesville and 9 surrounding counties, so probably everyone here falls into that area. Just give us a call. I have business cards at the back. If you have any other questions, let me know. And before I forget, if you didn't check in with Hannah or me at the beginning, please come find us at the end so we can get you checked in if you registered, so we have an idea of how many people are here. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Hannah Deal. I'm the Operations Coordinator at Community Investment Collaborative, or CIC. We are the host of the SBDC. So many letters that I struggle with sometimes, even though I say it every day. And for those who don't know anything about CIC, we are a nonprofit that helps small businesses and entrepreneurs, and we do that primarily through mentoring, financing, and education. So I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that Mandy and John, well, Mandy, I guess, just graduated from the workshop, but obviously her and her husband are working on their business together. And we have 2 other graduates of the workshop here, so that's pretty exciting. We're represented pretty well. We don't have many upcoming events right now, but today is the last day to apply for an upcoming entrepreneur workshop. And this takes place twice a year. It's in the spring and the fall, 16 weeks, 3 hours per week. It's a pretty big commitment, but it gives our entrepreneurs everything they need to know about how to run a business. So we have that going on. We also have a financial management program. This is FMP. That is an ongoing thing, happens year round. We have a mentorship program as well. And we have a co-working space. So if anyone is looking for somewhere to work that's pretty casual, small, fun, and doesn't cost very much at all, then we're the place to go. Yeah, Shira already brought up about checking in at the back. I also have business cards. We both remember them today, which is a rare event. So we'll pass them out as much as we need to. Feel free to come say hi. Thank you everyone for attending, and passing it to Greg.
Everybody, thanks for coming. I'm Greg Honig. I'm your designated CVIC board member. First of all, CVIC, Charlottesville Business Innovation Council. If you're not a member, you should be. If you want to be in touch with what's going on in business innovation in the city and technology in the city, we bring people together, connect people. Events like this and other events. The other way to get connected to people in this region is to go to the Hub CDA, a platform that we developed during the pandemic. It's hubcda.org. You'll find there businesses, organizations, resources, meetings, all kinds of stuff going on throughout the region. It's actually Region 9, which stretches upward up to 29 different counties. So the only event that we have coming up that might be of interest to you, other than this incredible event each month that we have, and Tech Night Takeover is the second Tuesday of every month. Right now it's at there. You should join us. Tech on Tap. Oh, not to talk about Tech on Tap. So Tech on Tap makes more sense, right? It's usually 5 o'clock on the second Tuesday of every month. But coming up on February 9th, we have a Tech Night Takeover, which we haven't done for a long time. And our Tech Night Takeovers, mainly because of the pandemic, are panel-driven events where we have an expert panel and a moderator, and we focus in on a particular topic. We've been wildly successful in the past. It's going to be right here on February 9th at 5 o'clock, and the topic is financial products. And the subtitle for the event is Let's Talk Dirty. So if that doesn't leave you there. So anyway, thanks for listening, and look into joining CEDIC, cedoinnovation.org, and we hope you come to know these guys. Thanks.
Awesome, thank you. All right, and then, let's do announcements, or, yeah, if any of you guys have announcements or your company's hiring, and then I can, like, I'm around the